grandfather, just to that Isaurian priest by whom I saw it for the first time. As for the second half of that unprecedented work which cannot be made again there, passing also from hand to hand owing to reasons of every kind, it finally also happened to get into one of the central communities of Asia, and during one of what they call earthquakes, it entered within the planet, though not very deep beneath its surface. Here I must tell you, by the way, also, how during that sixth descent of mine, I learned about all the aforesaid events, as well as about, in general, certain other similar information which had happened long before. I have already told you that during the sixth descent of mine there, I became a professional, namely, a physician hypnotist, and that I studied the strange psyche of your favorites with the help, among other things, of hypnotism also, that is, through the specific inherency acquired in their psyche. During the period of these activities of mine among them, I specially prepared some of them in a certain way, and made from these subjects what they themselves in former epochs called Pythias, and what contemporary beings call mediums. Into Pythias, or mediums, those three-brained beings are converted there, in whom either spontaneously, only owing to accidentally arranged surrounding conditions, or intentionally on the part of another consciousness, the inner functioning of the planetary body gets well accustomed to every change of the inner general psyche during sudden changes of their blood circulation, in consequence of which, in such subjects, there is not hindered the free functioning of various peculiarities of their general psyche, which are consciously or unconsciously directed from outside of their chief automatic data still present in them, for genuine being consciousness, which totality of functioning proceeding in them they call subconsciousness. In this same subconsciousness of theirs, owing to many causes formed in them, that particularity of the common psyche of the three-brained beings also accidentally survived, which in general might function under certain conditions, and which is called the seeing and sensing of what has occurred in the remote past. And so, my boy, when during the sixth descent of mine, I learned about the beginning of that sad, common cosmic history which came about there on your planet, and when I began to investigate it on the spot during my sojourn there, and also to make clear to myself the individuality of this Makari Kronbergsion, then because a very long time had already elapsed since that event, and even every Kalzanuarnian trace concerning the being who was to blame for it, all had absolutely vanished there, I decided to have recourse, in addition to the ordinary forms of investigation, also to this spi-psychonalian means. Among these spi-psychonalian means of mine, I had recourse also to what is called mediumism. That is to say, I had recourse to the mentioned special property of the said mediums specially prepared by me. When, during my investigations concerning the actions and personality of this Makari Kronbergsion, it seemed probable that there still existed on the surface of that planet something which had a close connection with him, I just began to look for that something also in the said manner. Having learned in this way that the aforesaid Isaurian priest possessed the half I referred to of the copy of the original Boule Marchano, created personally by Makari Kronbergsion, and likewise having learned that the same Isaurian priest existed on the continent Asia in the locality of Urmia, I went there, and having found him, soon made it clear that indeed he had a very ancient and, as he expressed it, shapeless large ivory mass, which he himself considered very antique and valuable. Although after brief negotiations he agreed to show it to me, yet he did not wish to sell it for any money at all. Nevertheless, as a result of my talks and persuasions of several days, he allowed me to make an alabaster copy of it, which I took away with me. As for the second half, although owing to the same method of searching I soon found out where it was, yet it cost very much trouble and bother to obtain it for the immediate deciphering of its contents. Although I said that the second half had not yet had time during the period to enter deeply into that planet, yet nevertheless it did enter so deep that it was impossible to obtain it by ordinary methods. But my chief trouble was caused then by this, that the place where it existed was near a center, populated by your favorites, and I had to prepare everything in advance and to take all suitable measures in order that none of them should either learn nor even suspect anything about it at all. Among the measures I took, for instance, was even the purchase of parts of the outskirts of the given place from very large and small proprietors, and I had it dug by workmen exclusively of foreign origin, under the guise of preparing a shaft for what I called copper mines. And so, my boy, after I had found both of these halves of the copy of the creation of the pending Saint Makary Kronbergsion by the aforesaid means, and took them to the city of the country now called Turkestan, in which at that period I had the chief place of my existence, I began to decipher the inscriptions and incisions on the Boule Marchano of the scientific thesis by Makary Kronbergsion, under the title of The Affirming and Denying Influence on Man. When we return home, I shall without fail try to recall and tell you as nearly as possible, word for word, the whole contents of this great production of the reason, and, as is said, of the hand, of a three-brained being. But meanwhile, I will expound to you only that part of it in which Makary Kronbergsion first employed the notion of good and evil, signifying by these words those forces which are just the basis for the formation of the presence, as well as of the flowing state of every separate, relatively independent cosmic arising, and also, of course, of every being. If the notions recorded on this Boule Marchano were put into ordinary language, they could be stated in the following words. Evidently, we men, also like all the existing units of the world, are formed and always consist of the same three independent forces, by means of which the process of reciprocal maintenance of everything existing proceeds, namely, of the following three independent world forces. The first of these forces constantly arises from the causes which proceed in the prime source itself, and from the pressure of the newly arisen, and issuing from it by momentum flows out of that prime source. The second world force is what this first force becomes, when, after having spent the momentum which it has received, it strives to reblend with the source of its arising, according to the fundamental world law called the effects of a cause must always re-enter the cause. Both of these forces in the general process of reciprocally maintaining forces are entirely independent, and in their manifestations have always and in everything their own properties and particularities. The first of these two fundamental forces, namely that one which for compelling reasons always manifests outside the source of its arising, must constantly involve, and the second, on the contrary, striving to blend,